Good morning. Welcome everyone for this session on SFX activation settings for CDI. We're going to talk today about, first of all, some general principles and why we embarked on single activation for CDI with SFX. So some general ideas behind this. And then I'll talk about SFX settings for CDI. I'll first start with activation types we have. I'll talk about some additional CDI settings in the SFX admin center. I'll cover some best practices, and I'll point you to some places where you can find more information and how to reach out to us. So let's start with the general idea behind CDI and single activation in CDI. What we wanted to make sure is that you can use your SFX SFX admin center to do all kinds of activation. And until CDI came along and single activation came along, you were able to use the SFX admin and the KB manager mainly for activations that had to do with full text and that were mainly intended for being used by the link resolver, but also for your A to Z list, for your ebook search, and they were used in all kinds of discovery systems, Google's, other search engines, and Primo. Now, so this was until CDI single activation came along. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that you can use the activation process and the activation flow in SFX also for your discovery system. So to indicate what kind of things you want to search in your discovery system. So this is the new thing. We want to make sure that you have one place where you can activate collections, activate targets, and that place is going to be SFX. Let's look at some general principles for this single activation for discovery. The first thing we started with is that we want to make sure that all active full text that you have in SFX is published to CDI and automatically becomes searchable. So you don't need to do any additional search activation. You don't need to do activation for something which we call alternative coverage. I'll come back to this. Everything that you have in SFX that's active, all the active portfolios that you have, automatically become searchable in CDI when your users access your discovery system. Additionally, many, but not all of the collection, all of the targets in SFX can also be activated for discovery. And this is separately from the full text activation. This is a kind of additional activation that you may want to do. And the purpose of this is that the collections, the targets that you activate there will become available in the discovery system for search. And they're important in case there is no full text availability, you don't have any active portfolios, but you want the content of these collections to be included in the expand search on Primo. So these are the two general principles. Something else to keep in mind is that CDI rights also takes into account any local targets that you've created. So when we talk about all active content in SFX will become available for full text in CDI, we also talk about local targets. So any local target you've created with portfolios are included in the CDI holdings file as part of the CDI export and will be taken into account for the full text available indication in CDI. So, and also for making content discoverable. So regardless of whether it's a global knowledge base target with portfolios that you've activated in SFX or it's a local one, it will make sure that you get for the books or journals that you've created local portfolios for, they will trigger the full text available indication in your CDI discovery search. Now let's look, before we go into the details, let's look at some discovery terminology. The first thing I wanted to introduce here is two types of searches that you can do in discovery. The first type of search that you can do, and that's typically the initial search, is a search that's filtered by items that are available in full text to the institution. So anything that you've activated in SFX will trigger records to show up in what we call the filtered search, the initial search. It's a search filtered by full text availability. And the typical thing that you can how you can recognize this type of search is because all of the records that are returned from these types of filtered searches will get this green indication that says available online or full text available. And that's this full text available setting on Primo. Items are flagged as full text available and they appear in the filtered search. The color that we use in the Primo interface is green, is green text that says it's available in full text. So this is the filtered search. The second type of search we have is called the expand search. And this, what's included in this expand search? Everything that was included in the filtered search, so everything that's available in full text, plus everything that is activated in SFX for discovery. And that means it's not available in the library collection in full text, but it's still relevant for the end user to be shown, even though they don't have immediately an access to the full text. It's still relevant to be shown in the search result. So this is included in the expand search. How can you know that you're looking at an expand search? Because not all of the records will have this green available online indication. Some will have the gray indication saying that there's no full text. Plus, you also typically use this expand option in your Primo interface. So you expand the search beyond what you subscribe to in full text in the library to everything that's available in the world, and that the librarian has activated for you because they think it's relevant to be included, even though there's no full text for it. So this is filtered search and expand search. I also talked about the full text available setting on Primo. You can recognize it by this green color. The text is translatable, so that probably will not say available online. Maybe translated in a different language, and the text may appear different. And a last term that I wanted to introduce here is what is called alternative coverage. And that was used in Primo Central to make sure that for collections where the content was not indexed directly from the provider, or it was local content, that you could still search for it. So you subscribe to full text from one provider, but that may not be necessarily the metadata in CDI that's indexed. So the records in CDI actually come from a different provider. Alternative coverage is not activating collections for alternative coverage is no longer needed in CDI because everything that you have in full text automatically becomes full text available and searchable. So that's a little bit of a different approach versus Primo Central. So these are the main ideas behind CDI, and also a little bit of information about the single activation. Now let's look at SFX and how what's actually changed in SFX. What are the activation settings and additional settings that we introduced for CDI single activation? The first thing I'm going to talk about is activation types. And what you will see is that in SFX, we now have two types of activation. Previous to the single activation, and also for customers that don't have CDI, they will still see the activation for linking and full text availability. This is the first type of activation, and you can recognize it here on the right. You see this V sign that's either yellow or it's gray. This indicates full text activation that's either active when it's yellow or gray when it's not active. So what happens if something is active in SFX for linking and full text availability? First of all, if a target is active, it will appear in the SFX menu, in the A to Z, and in the ebook search. So your SFX menu will be affected by it. Additionally, what happens for CDI is that anything that you activate in full text will also be published to CDI to be shown in CDI as full text online and be discoverable. So this is new. Something to keep in mind is that in SFX there's different levels. There is activation on the target level, but also if there is a target service and portfolios, these also need to be active in order for something to be fully activated. So if you activate Springer, you need to activate the target service, and the portfolios that you subscribe to. So this is the first type of activation, and that's the full text activation. A second type of activation, and this one was introduced for CDI single activation, is called activation for discovery in CDI. This is also sometimes called search activation, but in SFX in the KB manager, you'll see it as activation for discovery. So what is this new type of activation? It is activation that really influences the expand search. It makes collections that you don't have available in full text searchable in CDI. It's also a bit different in that the activation is only on target level. You don't need to do service or portfolio activation for it. And the look and feel of this type of activation in CDI also looks a little bit different. It's indicated by this, what we call an orange dot. So it's not yellow, but it's orange. And it can be an empty orange dot, which means it's not active, or it can be a full one, and then it means it's active for discovery. So I'll go in the next slides. I'll show you what this looks like. But so this is the main slide of the day, I guess. This is really the two types of activation that I wanted to explain. In the edit target window, you can see that they are listed both. You have full text activation for linking and full text, and then you have the CDI activation. So how can you activate in KB Manager? In the target list, I've marked here some of the options, and let's first look at full text activation. So full text activation, you can activate in SFX by using these buttons, activate or deactivate, and the checkbox in combination with the checkboxes, or you can activate individual targets by using this toggle button that toggles between the orange, the yellow V and the gray V. So this is how you activate for full text in SFX. So these are the options. Either you use the buttons, or you in combination with the checkboxes, or you use the the activation column and you use the V sign. Now so this is full text activation. The search activation, how do you do that? You can use the activation buttons, activate for search, deactivate for search in combination with the checkboxes, and you can use the buttons, the toggle buttons from the empty orange dot to the full one. So this indicates that I've done search activation and I can make a change to it. You will notice that the orange dot does not appear for all of the targets. This is because not all of the targets can be activated for search in CDI. They can be activated for search in CDI if they have some kind of a connection with CDI, if they are indexed in CDI and we know what this collection is. So, for example, for local collections, you will not see this orange dot because CDI doesn't really know about these collections and will not know which records to make searchable. So this is how to activate. So let's look at that in a little bit more details. Let's look at some examples of active targets. So the first target that you see here is active for discovery only. And you can see that because it has no, the V sign here is not active. It's not yellow, but it has this full orange dot. So that means it's been activated for discovery only. The impact of it is that records from this collection will be included in the expand search when the user searches beyond what they have available in their library. Because there is no full text indication, there will be these records will not be in the filtered search. They will not have an indication that there's full text availability. The second example is a target in SFX, which is active for full text only. It is not indexed in CDI, so it cannot even be activated for discovery, but it's active in SFX for the link resolver, for the A to Z, etc. So this is indicated by this yellow V sign. So this one is a target that's active for full text. It's not a collection in CDI that can be activated for search or discovery. Okay, and then the last example, the third one, is a target that's active for both discovery and full text, and you can see that via the indication here. So what is the impact of the new type of activation, the activation for discovery? It's not needed for alternative coverage like it was in Primo Central. It has an impact only on the expand search, and you see an example here of the expand search with some of the records being available in full text and some not. And it is useful for those collections in CDI that you don't subscribe to in full text. You don't have it in your library, but you would like the content of the collection to be available for CDI discovery in the expand search. It is a useful collection, so your users should be able to discover it if they use the expand search. That's a typical scenario when you do activation for discovery. So as we said, you don't need to do it for alternative coverage. We moved all of the search activations from Primo Central to SFX CDI search activations as part of the CDI enablement for our customers. But it is useful to activate targets for discovery for content that you don't have available in full text, but you want your users to find it in the expand search. So this is discovery activation. Let's look at, so I mentioned already, how can you actually activate targets for discovery? You can, first of all, whenever you activate a collection for full text, you also automatically activate it as part of the full text activation. So if you click on the V sign here, or you use the activate, deactivate buttons, if the search activation is available, it automatically becomes active for search. Additionally, you can, in the KB Manager target list, use the buttons, the activate for search, deactivate for search, or the toggle button here. And also in the edit target window, you can activate for discovery. So these are the ways in which targets are activated for discovery. Okay, so the next thing I need to talk about is, as I explained earlier, not all of the targets have this orange dot and can be activated for discovery. So what does it mean? If this status exists, if you can activate for discovery, it means that the target can be activated for discovery in CDI, separate from the full text. And it also means that at least we guarantee that at least 80% of the collection is indexed and can be found in CDI. And either that's done directly, because the provider gives us the content and we load it into the CDI index, or in some cases, if the collection is not indexed in CDI directly, the coverage of 80% is indirectly via alternative coverage. That means we get metadata from other collections that index the same material. So those are the two ways in which we make sure that at least 80% of the collection is indexed in CDI, and this is when you will get the indication available for discovery activation, and you'll see the orange dots indication there. If the status does not exist, so if there's no orange dots in your list of targets, this means the target cannot be activated for discovery in CDI. It means you can only activate for full text, but the content, it does not exist, or at least does not exist for less than 80% in the CDI index. So something important here, and it's marked here in blue, is that when you want to activate a new target in SFX, and there's a choice between multiple candidates that fit the target that you subscribe to, we advise you to activate a target that has this available for CDI discovery activation in it. This means that if you want to get the collection also in your expand search, you don't just activate the collection for full text, but let's say you selectively activate the collection, you activate 10 of the 50 portfolios, but you want the content of the non-active portfolios to be available in your expand search, then it's better to use a target that has this available for CDI discovery activation indication. Okay, so Next thing I want to talk about is some filters, because we didn't just add activation options in the KB Manager target list, but we also added some additional filters. And the first filter I wanted to talk about is this filter target list by type. So what you see here is link targets, search targets, and all of them. What does it mean? First of all, link targets are the targets that existed in SFX prior to the CDI enablement, prior to the single activation. They're used in SFX for activation that's important for the SFX menu. They're used for linking. They have a target parser. They work just like any existing SFX targets that existed prior to the CDI enablement. They have a target service, and in most cases they also have portfolios. And the activation is on item level. That means you activate not just the target, but also the service and the portfolios. Now, in CDI, they're used for full text and search activations in a single flow. So this is these are the targets that you've been seeing all along. They're the Springer targets, they're the Gale targets, ProQuest targets, Elsevier targets. All of them have a working link syntax, have a target parser, and can be used in CDI, but also when you link from PubMed or you link from Google Scholar. New type of target that we introduced for the CDI single activation is what we call the search targets. These targets are not seen by any customer that has not been CDI enabled. They're also not seen if you don't use CDI, and they were added to the SFX knowledge base to allow activation for CDI discovery. They existed in Primo Central before. Now they're in the SFX KB Manager, and they're there so you can do activation for CDI discovery. These targets, they only have the target level. They don't have a service or portfolios, and they're never going to be displayed in the SFX menu. The full text linking, if you look at the description of the targets in the view or the edit target window, they will always say the full text linking will always be via the link in the CDI records. Because there's no target parser, SFX cannot really link. It doesn't know how to link to them, but the linking is handled via the CDI, the URL that's in the CDI record. So SFX doesn't really need to know any, need to do any linking for this. The activation is also only on target level. There is no service and there's no portfolios. So if we look back in the KB Manager, when you are CDI enabled, the filter type will be by default will be all targets, so you'll see all of them. But if you wanted to just do full text activation, you're not interested in CDI, and you want to have a shorter list, you can filter it by link targets. If on the other hand you say, well, I want to look at the targets that are only available for CDI, they're not important for linking, you can use this search targets filter. By default, it's set to all. Okay, so the next thing I need to talk about is additional filters, and these you can find by using this add condition option here. And they're relevant for CDI because they're a way to filter your target list by a number of CDI related filters. So I already talked about how to get to these filters. You can click on the add condition and then you can see what the filters are. We had a few filters prior to CDI, but we've added a number of new ones that you see listed here as well for CDI. The first one is available for CDI discovery activation. This is whether you can activate them for discovery, yes or no. And this is, I talked about what it means. So it means that you can activate them for discovery, and they will be included in your expand search. At least 80% of the coverage is indexed directly or indirectly in CDI. So that's the first one. We have a few other filters here that are related to CDI. The second one is CDI search rights. What are the rights for searching? Is it a collection that you can search for free, which is the majority of the collections, or is it a collection that you have to subscribe to actually be allowed to search? So this is a subscription search rights collection. Examples of these are Scopus or Web of Science, for example. Another third type of filter that you can use for CDI to filter the target list is what is called CDI full text rights. And what you have here is it open access or is it a subscription database? And the fourth one is CDI linking. How does the linking work in CDI? Do we link via the SFX link resolver, or do we link via the link in the CDI records that is provided by the provider? And then there's a last filter here that is about how does this work, this collection, this targets, this collection works in CDI for newspapers. Does it contain newspapers? Yes or no? And if it contains newspapers, is it available in the regular Primo search, Primo CDI search, or only in the newspaper search? All of these filters were also available in the Primo Central institutional profile, where you did the activation previously before we moved to single activation. And in SFX, the way to use the filters is to use this section in the KB manager that's about the filters, target filters. Okay, so this was the target list. I also wanted to mention here, and that's important, in the KB Manager, if you go to the Edit or the View Target window, you will see for targets that are available for CDI discovery activation, you'll see a new section here. And that's this. It will say this target is searchable via CDI with the following setting. And then it has all kinds of information that I explained in the previous slide in the filters, and some additional activation and additional activation and configuration settings. So if you want to have the details on CDI for a specific target, go to the Edit or the View Target window, and this will have all the information. Now, if we look in the screen, you see also that that there are some settings for activation and additional settings. First of all, you have the full text and linking activation that was there before, and that still looks the same. It says activation status is either active or inactive. Additionally, you also have the activation for discovery, which is in the CDI section. So that's this active in CDI for discovery. One thing to keep in mind is if you've created institutes in your SFX instance, so you have institute-specific activation, then you will not see this section. This will look a little bit different. Instead of having activation status and active in CDI for discovery, the activation for full text and CDI searching will be configurable in a separate section, institute section here at the top of the Edit target window. So this will look a little bit different, but because you can actually activate per institute instead of for the whole institution. All right, so this is the Edit target window. Now I want to go into two additional settings in CDI in the Edit target window that needs a little bit more explanation. So I talked about the window itself, the information about this specific target and what the collection is in CDI and what its properties are, what kind of searching and linking it has. I also talked about the activation status, activation for full text and activation for discovery. Now there's two special settings that I want to explain here. And the first one is called Selective Settings. Setting can be set to yes or no. And the second is an option to not show something as full text available in CDI, even if it's active in SFX. So those are the two settings I wanted to just explain in a little bit more detail. So the first thing is the selective setting. And this setting is used to define the type of subscription you have for a specific target. So it affects how full text availability is calculated in CDI Primo. So it affects the available online indication. What you need to do, and the defaults are actually set correctly, so there's no real need to make changes to this. But if you have a selective subscription, then you need to set this to yes. And the effect of this in CDI is that only active portfolios will be used to calculate this full text available setting on Primo. So if you activated 10 out of the 50 portfolios for a specific collection, only those 10 active portfolios will, let's say their journals, will get an available online indication in CDI Primo. The other 40 will not get this. So this is a selective yes setting. The setting is set to no, or should be set to no, for non-selective targets and in CDI, and that means that full text available, this available online indication, will appear for all the records in this collection in CDI. So we're not looking at portfolio activations in this case. We set all of the records connected to this collection in CDI to full text available. This is good because it improves the full text availability indication. It actually makes our life a little bit easier in CDI, in that we can say for the whole collection, everything is available. We don't have to match the portfolio information in the CDI export file, in the holdings file, with the CDI content. So it's good, especially for non-ID content, but it should only be set to yes for link in record type of targets, not for link resolver type of targets. Why? Because if you set this setting to yes, to no for a link resolver type of target, it will mean that you say all of the content is available in CDI, all of the records from the collection I will get this available online indication. But if there's missing active portfolios in SFX, the linking goes by the link resolver, you'll end up with a dead link because SFX will not have any active portfolios. It will not be able to show a nice link also. So we definitely do not recommend to change the settings for link resolver type of records. For link in record, it's a useful thing. So this is the selective setting. The second setting I wanted to talk about is an option that is called do not show as full text available in CDI, even if active in SFX. So this is a long option. The name of it is very long. And what it allows you to do is to kind of override the general principle that all targets that are active in SFX for full text will automatically be searchable in CDI and displayed as full text available. So if you use this setting, it actually means I activated in SFX, I activated it for the link resolver, I want to link to it, but in CDI, I don't want to see these records. I don't want to see these as full text available, and I don't want to see them in my filtered search. It's a setting that we added because we found that in some cases, customers deliberately did not activate something in Primo Central, because they didn't want to have it in Primo, but they still had it in active in SFX. So that's why we have this setting. You can use it. So if you can use it if you want full text activation in SFX because of the link resolver, but you don't want it to be visible in the discovery because it would clutter the results list for your end users, or you don't want to have duplicate ebook results from Primo Local and CDI. I'll come back to this duplicate ebook scenario in a minute. Also, in some cases, customers do not like the effect that activating books in SFX has. What happens in CDI is if you activate a book collection and there's book chapters available in CDI, then those will also be marked as full text available, which is nice. But some customers find that it means that there's a lot more results, and they don't like the fact that it clutters the result list. They think that those chapters are not relevant to their end users, so they want to take them out. So this is a way to provide customers this option. So this is what the option looks like in SFX. So content associated with the records from this particular target will not appear in the filtered search in Primo. It's a setting on the target level. So it means that you set it for a target, all of the content of the target will be taken out of the CDI holdings file, the export to CDI, and it will the records will not show up as in the filtered search. It will also mean that the records will not appear in the expand search, except if you've used discovery activation in CDI, but they will not get the full text online indication. And there's some notes here. If the same book, sometimes the same book or journal is available from multiple targets. So if you use this option for one target, it may still appear in CDI because you have other active portfolios for it. Also, it does not have any impact on the link resolver, only on CDI. So your users will still be able to link to the full text when they come from other sources than Primo. Okay, so this concludes the settings. So I talked about KB Manager, the activations, the additional settings, the filters that you can use, and the edit target window where you can see all of the information about CDI. Next thing I want to talk about is some best practices. There are some additional topics that I wanted to talk about that are important when we talk about CDI single activation in SFX. First thing I want to talk about is something that comes up in some of the support questions that we receive, and this has to do with handling duplicate eBooks in CDI. What we see in some cases for customers that use a blended search in Primo, so a search where they search both Primo local and CDI, is that they get duplicate ebook results. They get the book from their local content as well as from CDI, a CDI package. So how can this happen? First of all, it can be that the collection has portfolios activated for full text in SFX, because all full text portfolios that are active in your SFX instance are published to CDI. In addition to the bibliographic records being published to the local Primo index, you get these duplicate results. We have to keep in mind that we do not merge duplicates found between the local and the central index. So between your local Primo local index and the CDI index. This also was the case in Primo Central, by the way. This functionality has not changed. It also happens in case an ebook collection is active for discovery in CDI. The records in that case will only appear in the expand search with full text available unless there is an active portfolio in any of your SFX targets. So this is, I think, less of an important issue because this is in the expand search. The first case was in the filtered search, so this is much more noticeable to your end users. So how can you make sure, in case you do not like to have these duplicates in the search results, how can you prevent this from happening? What you can do is you can do two things. Let's look at what you could do in Primo Central first. So in Primo Central, what some customers did to prevent this was they deactivated book collections, and these would prevent them from appearing in the search results. Now in CDI, this is no longer possible. We changed the single activation, and the general principle is that all full text portfolios are automatically published to CDI, and they become searchable, and they'll be included in the filtered search. Now, if this is not what you want because you have these duplicates, you can do one of the following two things. First of all, you can fix this in CDI, or you can say, I don't want the records from CDI. I prefer the records from my local index. They're better quality. They look better. So in that case, what you can do is you can suppress the ebooks from being published to CDI and select the do not show as full text available in CDI, even if active, in the edit target window. So this is done per target. Or alternatively, you can handle this on the Primo local side and decide not to publish the ebook BIP records from SFX or your local catalog into your local Primo index. So either you either take out one, which is the local, or you take out the CDI records, and that will prevent duplicates from showing up. Okay, so there's some pros and cons to these. First of all, if you take out the ebook records from being published to CDI, it will take out the books from CDI, but it will, if there are any book chapters that we index, for those ebooks, they're also not going to appear in the search result. So this is a disadvantage. Not all of the books that you have will have book chapters, but some may. And if you take them out of the CDI export, that also has an impact on the book chapters. The second option also has some pros and cons. What is the impact of not publishing the bib records from SFX or from the catalog to your local Primo index? The impact is that the records will see the records from CDI and not from your Primo index. And but it will allow any book chapters that we index for CDI to appear in the search results and be marked as full text available. So these are the two options with some information on what is the impact of using the option. It also depends on what is your preference. Do you prefer the local records versus the ones from CDI? One thing to keep in mind is that there may also be duplicates caused by issues in the CDI match and merge process. So in this case, there's a duplicate not between a local record and a CDI record, but between two CDI records. If that is the case, then you need to report this via a support case, and we'll fix the duplication there within CDI. It may be an issue with the CDI match and merge process in how we actually merge duplicates inside the CDI index. So that needs to be handled by our content team. Last thing I want to talk about is the CDI export. And the CDI export, even though it's not an activation or a configuration setting, is very important for SFX and CDI to work together and for single activation. Why? Because this is how CDI knows what your activations are in SFX. In SFX, we have a new export format. It's called the CDI Export, available from the advanced export, but also available via the server admin utility and available via the task manager. And we recommend, and this is our recommendation when you start using CDI, is to set up a daily schedule for this CDI export so that CDI can then harvest the file and process the file and make sure that you get the right activations reflected in your CDI search results, both in the filtered search and in the expand search. So very important to make sure that you have set up a daily CDI export. I mentioned, it can be done via the task manager and the server admin utility, depending on what you're using in your SFX instance. It does not need to be set up for hosted customers because it's set up by Ex Libris. So there you don't need to schedule. This will be done for you. Let's look at some additional CDI export features that we have. First of all, there's one for customers that have a shared or consortium instance. This is where this is for larger consortia that use SFX that have multiple SFX instances, and one of them is a shared or a central instance that has or contains all of the consortia activations. If you have such a setup and you want to use CDI, then we have an option in the CDI export which says use the following additional export file. This has to be used in the local instance. So essentially what you then do is you use a file from the shared instance, the one that has all the consortia activations. You create an export is created there first, and then that's included in the local instance. In the shared instance, you also need to do something special because you have to indicate when you create such a file on behalf of the local instances, you have to use the option that's called use this file as an additional holdings file in another instance. So the effect of this is that the activations from the shared consortium instance are integrated in the CDI export of the local instance. The mechanism is a little bit different than in other exports, because also in the shared instance you have to use this indication. So that's why we wanted to mention it here. Another thing that's important in the export, and that's a little bit different and something that we wanted to alert customers to, and is an option in the CDI export to use the production full text holdings when publishing to CDI. What is this for? If you have a Primo sandbox with a dedicated PC key and you want to use the search activations from the SFX test instance combined with the full text activations from the production instance. So for example, your SFX test instance, it's not kept up to date and you don't have any full text activations there, but you do want to play around with the search the discovery activations, then you can use this option. And then in the test, in SFX test instance, you'll need to tick the option use production full text holdings when publishing to CDI, and you need to then give the production PC key information. That will make sure that CDI can, instead of using the full text activations from the test, use the activations from the production environment, the SFX local or the production SFX instance. If you want to use this option, you have to contact Exlibris, open a support case, and ask for the Primo Sandbox PC key to be changed, because something needs to be done on our side, in our system, in order for this to work. Okay, so this is a special the second special CDI export setting, and this concludes actually my presentation. So I talked about the general principles of single activation. I talked about the activation settings and additional settings. I also talked about some best practices and a little bit about the CDI export. So this concludes my presentation. The only thing I still wanted to mention is that we have a lot of information available on CDI and SFX in the Central Discovery Index section of our documentation center. There's information about target activation for CDI and SFX. There's also information about linking in CDI and how it works. And we also have a list of the collections that are available for CDI search activation, and that's updated very frequently, and you can see the link here. So the CDI collection list for SFX is also available. We also encourage you to, if you have any problem, that could be a linking issue, could be a problem in your environment with full text availability indications, or maybe the CDI export. If you have such issues, please open a support case, and our support team will look at this. This is for problems or issues that are specific to your environment. If you have more general questions, then please contact us at cdi_info@exlibrisgroup.com, because we have people there that monitor this email and can help you with general questions. Okay, so thank you for listening.